one of our original, I don't know what you would call it except a commission. An original commission from our Creator is that we were to move about on the land, but in a specific way. The Creator gave us this earth, and as a spiritual people, that's what we were to maintain, was a spiritual relationship. And all the things that we've learned, all the things that we were taught, were ways to maintain that relationship.
Corn is our symbol of life. It is our sustenance. It is the plant that we have the greatest and most direct relationship with through the many generations of our life as Pueblo people.
Corn is referred to as mother corn because the corn, when it's not fully ripened, there's milk inside the kernels. So milk we get from our mother, and milk we get from our corn. So our elders have always referred to corn as corn mother.
Blue corn really was an integral part of my childhood, and it's a strong food image for me even now. And the way we ate blue corn was as a cereal. So we ate it as a hot cereal called atole, and also as chaquewe. Chaquewe is a Native American term, I think, from Tewa or Tiwa. And I remember we'd grow the blue corn and we'd grind it, and then my mom would make this wonderful, fantastic cereal drink early in the morning, especially in the winter. And that was how we'd start our day, was having a cup of chaquewe or a bowl of atole every day, and that would really fortify us to get out into the world each day, and I really miss that. I still can make chaquewe and I can still get blue cornmeal, but not a lot of it's not grown locally anymore, and I have to go look at specialty stores to find it.
And one of the major crops that we can say is iconic of this time is the chile. And chile is a perennial, and it has a longer growing season down south. So to me, it's a monument of adaptation of crops to new conditions, because here, where we see the chile was established, the growing season is 90 days. So it was the annualization of a perennial.
Some of the wild foods that are very important to Native people in this area, number one would be the piñon. And there are, in many of the pueblos, creation stories about the pine nut. And during times of famine, when there was no wild game, for instance, bison, elk, venison, quail, the turkey has always been domesticated here, pine nuts literally sustained the Pueblo people.
I think that most of the old varieties of apples have disappeared. There's a few left, and doing some of the research, I found that there might have been about 400 varieties of apples in New Mexico as late as the 1940s. And you still find them throughout the valley here, throughout northern New Mexico. Old trees along the acequia banks by the river or in abandoned orchards,
Well into the 1920s and 30s and 40s, the Pueblos were very self-sufficient with regard to production of these staples, corn, beans, and squash. And I think after World War II, some of that resilience and also that reliance, as well as that sustainability within the communities to create their own food base began to diminish significantly.
I'm that person that still chops wood. I'm that person that still hauls water. I'm that person that's raising 3 kids, showing them how to farm, showing them how to live off the land. I recently adopted 60 head of sheep. And again, my children are out there with me. My youngest one is 2, and her favorite word is "ma." So I am that person that still farms and has livestock. Napama practices, which is growing dry crop corn. And now our neighbors upstream might be growing sweet corn, hundreds of acres of sweet corn. And your little plot gets pollinated from these different corns. And so it doesn't grow as well as regular Napama corn would grow. And I've had that happen to me a few times where I planted all white corn, my neighbor planted blue corn, my whole crop turned blue and white. So again, I have to restart that small seed again. And by doing that, I usually go into other tribes looking for Napama planters. And they're hardly ever out there anymore. Napama is a practice that has been practiced throughout different tribes for hundreds of years. Now there's different kind of Napama practice. There's the dry crop farming. There's also practices where they got the farm ready the year before by creating berms to slow the water down so it can start saturating the dirt.
In this area, if it was going to be a particularly wet year, and you would know that by monitoring the snowfall, watching the snowpack in the mountains, you would have an idea of what the irrigation season was going to be like. So if you knew you're going to have a lot of water, then you could plant those crops, namely corn, peas, the different crops, squash, that require water. If you were seeing that you had a meager winter snowfall, then you would break out the other toolbox, which would be lentils, garbanzos, beans, and so in different years, you would be variably successful with these different strategies, which would ensure food security over the long term.
If we can show younger Hispanos in northern New Mexico that the land has incredible value for growing crops and that they can succeed in the 21st century economy, global economy, at a very high level, not just subsistence, but at a very high level, through organic farming and by doing all the traditional crops through an organic lens, I think we can get them to stay on the land and to recommit to what was a traditional lifestyle. Now, writers like Kunstler in his book, The Long Emergency, have talked about the fact that he believes, or he projects, that in the next 50 or 75 years, certainly in the next 100, we'll probably see the end of this 200, 300-year period of modernity, which means we're not going to be able to get cheap crops from around the world. We're not going to get cheap clothes from around the world because there will be no way to get those products to us, to local markets. And so that we're going to have to essentially go back to the future. And that future is going to be us reconnecting with neighbors, us growing our own gardens, us finding everything we need within a 50-mile radius of where we live.
I think that Native communities could definitely participate more and benefit from a local food economy because that's our tradition. That's what our communities stem from, those, centuries upon centuries of living within and using the natural resources around us.
And so I don't think local is the only term we need to use. I think we need to focus in our own communities and do as much as we can locally. But then I think we need to be conscious consumers and conscious about what we buy that is sustainable in other parts of the world.
I'm a firm believer that we can reestablish, reacclimatize these crops and recreate land races, recreate the crop diversity, and re-indigenize ourselves with the landscape using these crops as our connector.
My dream is that my children will continue to farm, that they'll continue to be in my field, and that they'll continue to hunt and gather and pick the things that are part of our life, that are part of our cultural patrimony, that they'll maintain those relationships that those resources imply. Because for us, it's not about collecting a resource. It's about a relationship to place and a relationship to who we are as Native people and to our ancestors as they go back. It's our relationship that's spelled out in our songs and in our prayers and in our traditions.